is the Comfortably Zoned Radio Network, and it is time for According to Fastball John and David Jordon. Take it away, guys.
Hi, this is John D'Acquisto with According to Fastball John with my co-host, Dave Jordon. Today, Dave and I are going to be talking about the Hall of Fame inductees of 2017. And that will be Tim Raines, Ivan Rodriguez, Pudge, as we called him, and Jeff Bagwell. So, we'll also be talking about the new thinking of the baseball writers of America. Are they really looking at sections of the new eras, or the eras, the dead ball era, the juiced up ball era, or the steroid era? We'll be looking at that also. We'll also be touching a little bit on Pete Rose and what Pete Rose is capable of possibly getting back into the Hall of Fame. So, hold on to your seats, fasten your seatbelts. We're ready to go. And let's welcome Dave Jordon. Hi, Dave. How are you doing?
Hey, Johnny. How you doing?
Doing fine. Welcome on the show, and thanks for being my co-host. We should have a lot of fun with this.
Happy Sunday. It's always a good time hanging out and talking.
Yeah. So let's talk about the Hall of Fame inductees, Dave, where we have Tim Raines. Let's start with Tim. Tim's one of my favorites. He was one of my teammates. In fact, we both showed up on the scene in 1980 together for the Montreal Expos, and I thought he was one heck of a player when he first showed up.
Yeah, that was a crazy time, man, in the midst of all that. And we talked a lot about that in that amazing pennant race between your Expos and the Philadelphia Phillies. And there was kind of an interesting situation, being that the left fielder of the Expos at the time was Ron McClure. And you had Raines coming up as the second baseman. Rodney Scott was already in place at second base. And what was the feeling in your mind when Raines was there? Were there high X? I mean, he led the American Association in batting with like a 354 clip in 1980 before he was brought up. So there must have been some expectations about his performance.
Well, they brought him up at that time because you're right. Ronald Ford was injured, not seriously injured, but couldn't really play to his full capacity at the time. And with him hitting 354, he was going to get called up at the end of the year anyway. But they decided to bring him up around when I came up, which was the middle of August. And, you know, when he showed up on the scene, there was just this amazing glow in this young man. And he was, 20 years old, at that time. And I know he had a brief appearance, but didn't really play in 1979. But when he showed up, his work ethic was totally awesome. He was one of the guys that he just went out and did his job. He kept in great condition. He was a personable young man. He was funny, a character. We called him The Rock because he was like almost like Mike Trout. He had the same type of build. He was stout and strong and could run like the wind. And when you go back and look at the differences between Tim Raines and Mike Trout, Mike could hit the home run, but Timmy was built the same way and had that kind of speed, the quick burst of speed, and could steal bases and played the outfield rather well. So with LaFleur being hurt, it wasn't really going to be that much of a detriment to our group to have Ron missing with Timmy Raines playing. He also played second base a little bit too.
Yeah, it's really funny. One of the statistics he's known for is stolen base, successful stolen base percentage, about 85%. It's pretty much untouched for base stealers at that level of accomplishment. Funny thing was, in his first, the 2 cups of coffee he came up in '79. He didn't even appear at a plate appearance, but he stole a couple bases. And he stole 5 bases for the '80 Expos, and he wasn't caught in either season.
Yeah, I know. And you look at that 85% base stealing percentage, that was higher than Ron LaFleur at the time, too.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Which was very interesting. And that's why they brought him up, to make sure we were solidified in that particular position, although we didn't get to go thanks to game 161. But, that's another story in its own right.
That is another story. And also, you had LaFleur's impending free agency, and, it was almost something similar to like one of the Renner players for Bill Beck's 77 White Sox. You had LaFleur for a year and only cost you Dan Chassiter, a southpaw fifth starter, and, it was a matter of, would you want to spend the free agency money on 3 or 4 more years with LaFleur, or do you want to roll the dice on a guy who's hitting 354 in AAA and getting on base at a 400 clip?
And I think that question was answered rather swiftly, because when I was pitching in 1981 with the California Angels, I faced Ron LaFleur, but he was with the Chicago White Sox. So
I know.
I guess they were thinking the same way you were thinking, is no, we're going to keep the kid, and we'll pass on Mr. LaFleur and send him off someplace else, which was actually a pretty good move on the part of the Montreal Expos at the time. There was some internal problems that Ron was having with his own demons at that time.
Well, but it turned out that they were right. He batted ringside at 304 his rookie season, stole 71 bases in 88 games. That's there's a good chance he probably would have hit 100 had the strike not happened.
Yes. No, you're absolutely right, Dave. He would have hit 100. And that's not speculation. That's probably fact. Look at how many bases he did steal in 88 games, and that's just, he stole 71. Well, just add another 80 games into that schedule and you double it. He would have stole over 140 bases at that rate.
He came close in 1983 to the triple-digit mark. He stole 90, and he was only caught 14 times. Pretty remarkable. Yeah,
it is pretty remarkable. And he was also, he had the instincts of the player instincts that you look for. Plus he was brought up into an outfield with Andre Dawson and Ellis Valentine. And you look at that, and those two guys could really tell you how to play an outfield, especially the Hawk, being in center field. He really helped Tim out a lot, especially when I was there, when Tim came up at the middle of August. Andre took him under his wing and really helped him and explained to him about certain hitters and how you have to play them in Olympic Stadium and on the road in different parks, because he never got that experience. And now, they really worked hard together on that. And they, playing caroms off the wall, and, they were working hard on that together. And I remember Ozzie Virgil used to hit fly balls out there to him and hit them off the wall so they could learn how to play it. And, I mean, that's teamwork. That's teamwork. And Timmy was there. He was there. He worked hard. And that's why he is in the Hall of Fame, because of that work ethic. Yeah.
And that 80 ball club had a slew of veteran outfielders, the Jerry White of the world and the Roland Offices. There's a 70s name for you. Out there who were kind of just there to show him the ropes, so to speak.
Yeah, exactly. So it's a good situation, at that point, when you're looking at things that are really coming to the forefront, and here you've got such a talented group of guys, at that particular stage. It's like, what am I doing here? It's like, should I come back here? Those decisions had to be made at that time, and it's very hard to look at and not and not really think that, you passed up a chance maybe to be that extra guy that might have taken him to that 1981 championship, into the World Series.
Yeah.
But could have been, should have been, would have been.
Yeah.
So, but that's Tim Raines. So the next guy we're going to touch base on is a gentleman by the name of Ivan Pudge Rodriguez. And
one of the great.
Oh, God, yeah, you can't say enough about him. Go ahead. I'll let you run with that.
Well, obviously one of the greatest defensive catchers of all time.
Yes.
You want to talk about guys who he was a power hitter, and then he was a contact hitter, and then he was a gold glove backstop. Absolutely amazing. And, he had one of the highest fielding percentages in terms of sabermetrics of all time as a catcher. And you look at the first ballot Hall of Famer, and almost
absolutely
as valuable as the guys of the elk of Fisk and Carter and Johnson, Johnny Banks, obviously.
Definitely. And what was really ironic? You had Pudge, Ivan Rodriguez, inducted into the Hall of Fame in 2017 with a base stealer, Tim Raines, who Pudge tried to throw out many times. and that's really ironic. That's really ironic. And so with Tim playing in both the American League and the National League, and I know he lost a lot of speed, but he didn't lose his quickness as he got older. But Pudge just had a cannon for an arm. And you look at the all-around catchers, and I'm really glad that they inducted Ivan Rodriguez, because you look at the particular talent that man had behind the plate. I look at other catchers these days. Yadier Molina rings a bell in my head about being classic defensive and offensive threats. And you look at Ivan Rodriguez, and you just say an all-around player, great team guy, and did a lot for the game. And I mean, he really sticks out in my head as a Texas Ranger. And he was great in Detroit, but he was greater in Texas.
Yeah, it's pretty remarkable. The time he had down in Arlington, he was absolutely fantastic. And look, he brought one team to the World Series, to Detroit in 2006. He won the World Series for Marlins in 2003.
Yep.
And he was definitely by all accounts a money player, and that's why he was even in the twilight of his career, when he was no longer that effective with the bat, he still brought an element of leadership to a number of franchises: the Yankees, the Houston Astros, a second helping of time in Texas, and the Washington Nationals for the last two seasons.
Exactly. And it's really interesting. It's really interesting that he bounced around so much. You would think he would just light it at one level and stayed on one team for his whole career. But a lot of opportunities came up for him, and he took those opportunities or got traded. Is more the opportunities that he went and sought, and then performed on top of it. You want to call him a hired gun? He might have been a hired gun, but you know what? It's one of the best hired guns in baseball, in my opinion.
No doubt about it. He was on the early Texas Rangers teams in the 2000s and the aughts with A-Rod for a year or two, and they ran into some money issues. Tom Hicks, the owner of the Rangers, and he wouldn't match A-Rod's demands, and he ended up in Florida as literally a hired gun for a season.
Yeah.
They got their World Series, and then he was off to Motor City.
Yep, exactly. And it's interesting how you look back at guys' careers and for how long they played, and it tells a story. It tells a story. And I mean, every ball player's got a story, including yours truly. But it's like they really are like fingerprints. Everybody's different. You know, and I could sit there and think about the times when I watch pitchers and I try to analyze a pitcher, and I look at each one of them, and they're all different. You know, there's not one pitcher that looks the same. They all have their different quirks, you know, and then we go all the way back to that fingerprint on your thumb. You know, everyone is different. So everyone doesn't do the same thing. I mean, they basically do the same thing, you know, at contact or something, but it's how they get to that point of contact or the ball release that is different. And it's very unusual, but that's why baseball is so beautiful. You know, it's because everyone is different and they all play as a team together. Now, the next guy we're going to talk about is Jeff Bagwell. Bags had, you know, I mean, you talk about a scrapper. You know, he played the game hard. And, you know, he was, once again, the same thing, great work ethic, you know, but the man hit for average. I mean, he hit, and, you know, a lot of times guys hit for average. They don't hit when there's men on base. Jeff Bagwell did. Jeff Bagwell was a major part of that Houston Astros team. And his longevity factors were because he worked hard. You know, he worked hard, he kept in shape, and, you know, his shorter, stout body. Now, and here's the thing. The guys that were drafted, not drafted, but inducted into the Hall of Fame in 2017 were under 6 feet.
Yeah.
All
That's
three of them.
amazing.
Isn't that pretty amazing?
It is pretty amazing. He was quite a clutch player. He batted .308 with runners in scoring position throughout his career.
Yeah,
and,
exactly.
If he wasn't hitting, he was getting on base at a 450 clip. So
pretty impressive. Pretty impressive.
Oh, it really is.
Plus his
Really
3,000 hits, you know, for itself. You know, and he did that on a team. Sometimes the Houston Astros weren't playing as well as they could, but Jeff Bagwell was participating. He was putting his numbers up. You know, and it's like you see guys like that, and you know, you say, okay, I'm in the big leagues. I don't really have a choice. I got on a team that's not doing real well, but I can make it better if I get the numbers.
Yep.
Nobody showed up to play.
You know, the remarkable thing that I see when I see Jeff Bagwell, I also see Craig Biggio, who was inducted a couple years back into the Hall of Fame, is that they both, in this era, when the allure of free agency is so strong, when the mighty dollar is much bigger and the rate is much larger than it was even 10, 15 years ago, both of these guys stayed in the Houston organization their entire careers. And that does speak to management. That speaks to management's ability to recognize their value to the franchise and keeping them in place, and also their affection for the Houston area.
Yes, exactly, and that was a big part. They were hometown guys, and you know it's just good to see. It's just good to see, and you know the difference now is when we see players that are being looked at, and they're starting to get, you know, drop the bar a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
Now we're going to touch on something that's what you and I have talked about a lot, and dropping the bar, and where the baseball writers seemingly have dropped that bar tremendously to where they're now pigeonholing certain eras and saying, all right, we have the dead ball era guys. We got the juiced up ball era guys. We got the strike era guys. We got the golden era of baseball guys. And now we have the steroid era of baseball guys. Mm-hmm. And looking at those votes that Barry Bonds and Roger Clemens got, there's some lobbying going on with the baseball writers about why not put them in. We'll just call it an era. What do you think about that?
I think there's a number of things that the Hall of Fame is such a wonderful experience, and it's such a great place to go and see, the birth of baseball and the growth of baseball and all of the history that's in those doors. It's just it's a fabulous, fabulous time and place to enjoy yourself. And I think that you can never have enough attractions, we'll say. And you need that to get people to continue to go there. Something that I've been pushing for forever is they should have a special induction of teammates. And, guys like Sweetly Whitaker, everyone's complaining he fell off the ballot 15 years ago or so after 1 year. And there's been a push for him to get back on the ballot in some case. And Alan Trammell, who also recently fell off the ballot. I mean, that they were, in my view, they were legendary teammates.
Oh, absolutely.
Steve Garvey, Davey Lowe, Bill Russell, Ron Say, they were legendary teammates.
Yep.
And I think that even if it's something that's just recognized in a wing and it's not where everyone gets their individual bust, but that's something that I think nobody's really going to say, oh, this is lame or this is weak or whatever. It's still something special, and even if it's the consolation prize, so to speak, it's still a recognition of their careers and the men.
Yeah. No, I agree with you 100%. That's a very good point too, David.
And what's tough with what they have now, the early baseball from 1871 to 1949, then there's the Golden Days era, 1950 to 1969, modern baseball from 1970 to 1987, and today's game, which goes from 88 to right up till the present. And you look at somebody like, what are you going to do with Dick Allen? He was great in the Golden Days. He was amazing in the modern baseball era. I mean, he led the league in home runs in 72 and 74. He was phenomenal with Philadelphia after going through all the racial nonsense in the town. You look at someone like Sal Bando. I mean, Sal Bando's going to be on one of these, he's going to be a potential candidate. He did very well in the 60s with the Kansas City A's, and then he had the great times with those Oakland A's teams in the mid-70s. Look at Detroit Cannon, Jimmy Wynn. He was phenomenal with Houston. Then he had the great year with the Dodgers. He almost took the A's out in the 74 series. I mean, it's nice that they're recognizing them. I think this is a move forward, and it's a good move forward. But there's going to be some kinks in the armor.
Yeah, I think it is a great move. Loosening the belt and being able to be aware of it. We cannot hide the fact that steroids were used, in the segment where all these home runs were hit. We can't ignore it. The Androstein kids and the Cansecos, the McGuires, even I'm not even going to say Barry because he never did admit it, but we'll throw him on, into that group. But you got Roger and Barry getting almost 70% of the vote, and they were only a point between each other.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
and that was impressive. That was impressive in its own right.
And it's sad to see guys like Gary Sheffield in his third year. He got only a little more than 13% of the vote. And
how about Lee?
An extraordinary player.
Yeah, how about Lee Smith? Lee Smith can't even get. He only got 13% of the vote. Yeah. And you look what Lee did in his participation with the Chicago Cubs. And in the Cardinals, and you look and you go, my God, and Trevor almost gets in on his first go around.
Yeah.
So, it's hard to say.
The whole issue with closers getting into the Hall that's an entirely different conversation. And it's Trevor Hoffman, and we'll speak to a little bit of the allure of Bagwell and Biggio, that he was, for all intents and purposes, Mr. Padre, to a lesser degree than Tony Gwynn, but the whole town, as I'm sure you know, absolutely adored him. And
definitely. Including my niece Christina. She adored him too.
Yeah, I mean, there's so many rich conversations to have about the Hall right now. And there's a lot of people pushing for Larry Walker. There are people that have concerns about the Colorado years. And they're saying, well, Sheffield can't get in until Larry Walker gets in. But, it's like I would love to switch Gary Sheffield and and Larry Walker's teams and home ballparks their careers and see what their numbers look like.
Oh, their numbers would be direct opposite. You know, it's like Sheffield would probably hit almost, 600, 700 home runs playing in Colorado. I used to see Gary Sheffield every time he would hit a ball, he would knock it, 9 miles to begin with. What would he have done in Colorado? Probably hit it out of the park or hit the Bronco in the butt,
Yeah.
The way it is.
And you look where Sheffield played. He played in Florida, which is a big ballpark. He played in L.A. He played
Heavy
in
air ballparks.
Yeah.
L.A., the ball only jumps out in L.A. during the day games, and the same way in Miami. At night, that sea air comes in, the coastal air, and it comes in and it stops the ball from going out of the park. San Diego's another example. They're all coastal ballparks. And all the guys that played in those coastal areas, except for one by the name of Barry Bonds in San Francisco, hit well over 700 home runs. And a lot of them in San Francisco to boot.
Yeah. And let's not forget, he also spent 2 seasons in Atlanta at Turner Field. It wasn't a launching pad.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly. So let's talk about our last friend here that we've had conversations on, Pete Rose. Pete Rose is a great friend, great player. His numbers are astronomical. If they start putting the steroid guys in, everyone's going to say, John, you're off. It's gambling. Yeah, it's gambling. The Rule 21 rule was put into effect because of gambling by someone by the name of Ty Cobb, and Mountain Landis implemented that rule to save Ty Cobb's career.
Right.
Well, Ty Cobb's record was broke by Pete Rose. They both gambled. What's the difference?
I think we're making incremental progress on Pete Rose, and I think that first, he was allowed to participate in Cincinnati Reds activities. You see him on Fox Sports now, and there's a clip of a conversation about hitting from last season between Pete Rose, Frank Thomas, and Alex Rodriguez, and you just watch how Frank Thomas and A-Rod just listen to Coach Pete go at it about hitting. And that was
one of the greatest segments I've ever seen in my life, was listening to Pete tell 2 all-time hitters how to hit. It was great. I thought it was great. Mm-hmm. But then again, Pete's an all-time great too. So, but the 3 of them together, and those 2 were just sitting there in awe of Pete Rose.
Yeah.
Because Pete's a student. But what brings Pete to the forefront is Pete was a professor. I mean, he would watch you if your belt moved differently, if your finger moved differently on a certain pitch. That's how intense Pete Rose was. He caught me twice. Once he caught me lifting my finger up. The other time he caught me when I had my arms high for a fastball and my hands lower for a curveball. And I said, Pete, are you really that good? He goes, yes, I am. I'm really that good. I said, well, I'm not going to question you about it, but thanks for saving my career. It's basically it.
And the other interesting part about that story is that he caught it on videotape. He watched it again on videotape. He was watching videotape before Tony Gwynn, before all the motion analysis that came out in the early 90s. He was watching and studying game film in the late 70s in baseball.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. I know it was fascinating. It was fascinating. He was a true student of the game. He would tell me, I see you had a great game. You had a great game in San Francisco, and now you're coming here, you're going to use it on us. Because he was reading the paper. And seeing what he had to face in the coming series that were coming up.
Yeah.
Well, I just think that Pete should be in the Hall of Fame because of the numbers that he put together in breaking the record. You know, it's just my feeling, and not because he's my friend, but because what he did on the field of play as a player, he really went all out to beat you.
Yeah.
You know, gambling or not, he went out to beat you. And that tells me right there as a player, there was some sanctity there about wanting to beat you. Whether he was betting on that game or not, he beat you. And they won a lot of championships because of Pete Rose. Great teams.
Well, Dave, I think that everybody, that most people have a very definitive view on this, and I don't begrudge either side, because, you know, the law is the law is the law is the law. On the other hand, that, you know, if you believe in parole, you know, that there are thoughts that maybe he's served his time. But you know what? I think we are making incremental progress, and he is getting to participate, and he is getting to both be part of the game, be at the spot on the Fox Sports telecast, and he gets to live his life. And I'm pretty sure Pete's loving his life right now.
Yes. Yeah, everyone spends some time, you know, in how we say solitary. Pete Rose is in solitary confinement right now, and he understands what he did. Is he, you know, willing to say that, you know, he's admitted he has. He even told the commissioner he still does, but he's out of the game. The object is that he admits to it. You know, put him in for what he did as a player, okay? Because that has to be, you know, if you got his bat and his ball, his shoes and his glove in the Hall of Fame, then put him in the Hall of Fame. That's all I got to say. If you don't want Pete Rose in the Hall of Fame, to take his bat, his shoe, his ball, you know, that was the 4,000 plus hits, take it out of the Hall of Fame and leave it at that. But don't put his bat, his ball, and his shoes and everything else in there, not him. That's all I got to say.
You know, I think that, you know, seeing him, I've been up to Cooperstown when Pete's there. He's there on induction weekend. There's certain things he can't do. There are certain places he can't go. But when he goes up there, the lines are out the door. Say hello to him. There's children that were, you know, that weren't even born long after he served his time, and they still want to see Pete. There are 40-year-old men who stop when Pete shakes their hand.
Yeah.
You know, so he gets that fulfillment every induction weekend. He gets to go up there. He even gets to hang out with Morgan, you know, and Joe Morgan and Schmitty when he wants to, when he's up there. They get to have a good time together.
Yep.
So it's not like, you know, he gets to bring his family too. So he gets treated like an ultra VIP when he gets up there, regardless of whether, you know, he gets to put the yellow jacket, the gold jacket on or anything.
Yeah.
I think he still gets to get a taste of a really rich taste of glory when he's there.
Yeah, he does. He does. There is no doubt about it in my mind. Well, that's going to wrap up this segment for According to Fastball John. This was our inaugural show. Thanks, Dave Jordon. You were great as usual. And also, remember, you can buy Fastball John on Amazon.com and Barnes & Noble and enjoy it. It's a great book, and have fun reading it. Take care, and we'll see you next week.
Take care, guys.
All right. Very good, David. Let's see.